The August heat pressed down on Atlanta like a physical weight, the morning sun already blazing white against the glass towers of downtown. Lieutenant Sarah Collins sat in the small conference room on the third floor of the Zone 5 precinct, her laptop open before her, the camera light glowing green. Beside her chair, Max lay perfectly still, his tan and black coat gleaming under the fluorescent lights, his dark eyes fixed on the screen with an intensity that made Sarah glance at him twice. The virtual courtroom interface showed the familiar grid of participants. District Attorney Melinda Vance occupied one square, her silver hair pulled back severely, her expression professionally neutral. Defense Attorney Raymond Chu appeared in another, his tie loosened slightly, papers scattered across his desk. The defendant's square showed an empty chair in a sterile room at the Fulton County Jail, where Marcus Webb would appear momentarily for his preliminary hearing on money laundering charges spanning 3 years and 17 shell companies. Sarah had testified against Webb twice before in depositions. The case was solid. Forensic accountants had traced over $40 million through a labyrinth of fake consulting firms, real estate purchases, and offshore accounts. Webb had been careful, but not careful enough. His network had laundered money for drug traffickers, human smugglers, and at least one organization the FBI suspected of domestic terrorism connections. Today was supposed to be routine, a confirmation of charges, a setting of trial dates, nothing more. The judge's square flickered, and Theodore Harmon appeared. He was a man in his late 60s, distinguished, with grey hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Sarah had appeared before him 6 times over the years. He was known for his fairness, his meticulous attention to procedure, his zero tolerance for grandstanding from either prosecution or defense. Sarah straightened in her chair as the hearing began. Max shifted beside her, his ears rotating forward, and she reached down automatically to rest her hand on his head. The dog's muscles were tense beneath her palm. Judge Harmon cleared his throat. This hearing is now in session. Case number 2024 CR 4471, State of Georgia versus Marcus Allen Webb. All parties present? The attorneys confirmed their presence. The camera in the jail interview room showed Marcus Webb being escorted to his seat, his orange jumpsuit bright against the grey walls. He was a man who had once commanded boardrooms, whose tailored suits cost more than most people's monthly rent. Now he sat with his hands folded, his face carefully blank, though his eyes darted constantly to something off-screen. "Lieutenant Collins," Judge Harmon said, "you're appearing today to confirm your previous testimony regarding the K-9 unit's involvement in the initial investigation. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. Let the record show that Lieutenant Collins is accompanied by her partner, K-9 Unit Designation Max, badge number 847. Ms. Vance, you may proceed with your questions." The district attorney nodded and began her methodical review. Sarah answered each question with the precision born of years of courtroom experience. Yes, Max had alerted on Webb's vehicle during a routine traffic stop 18 months ago. Yes, the subsequent search had revealed financial documents that shouldn't have been there. Yes, those documents had led to the first warrants, which had led to more documents, which had eventually unraveled Webb's entire operation. It was during the defense attorney's cross-examination that Sarah first noticed something wrong. Max had been lying quietly throughout her testimony, his breathing steady, his posture relaxed but attentive. But when Raymond Chu asked his third question, something changed. The dog's body went rigid, his head lifted from his paws, his ears pricked forward with such intensity that Sarah stopped mid-sentence. "Lieutenant Collins," Chu prompted, "is there a problem?" Sarah looked down at Max. The dog wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the laptop screen with fixed, unblinking concentration. His lips had pulled back slightly, not quite a snarl, but the precursor to one. A low sound emerged from his chest, barely audible. a frequency that Sarah felt more than heard. "My apologies, Counselor. Could you repeat the question?" But even as Chu repeated his query about chain of custody procedures, Sarah found her attention split. Max never reacted like this without cause. In 7 years of partnership, she had learned to trust his instincts more than her own. The dog sensed things that humans couldn't, whether it was the chemical signature of fear, the subsonic vibration of a hidden threat, or something else entirely that defied explanation. The hearing continued, but Sarah's answers became automatic. She was watching Max, she was watching the screen, and slowly, incrementally, she began to notice details that hadn't registered before. Judge Harmon's office looked different. The bookshelf behind him seemed slightly off, the volumes arranged in an order she didn't remember from previous hearings. The light falling across his desk came from the wrong angle for the time of day, and there was something about his movements, a microsecond delay between his words and his gestures, as if the synchronization wasn't quite perfect. The court system's software chose that moment to auto-adjust the video feed, zooming in on the judge's face as he prepared to speak. The image enlarged, filling the screen, and Sarah saw Judge Harmon's expression change. For just an instant, less than a heartbeat, something flickered across his features. Fear, desperation, a silent scream trapped behind a mask of judicial composure. Then the connection died. The screen went black. A spinning loading icon appeared, followed by an error message, "Connection lost." Attempting to reconnect. "What the hell?" Raymond Chu's voice came through the speakers, tinny and confused. "Did everyone else lose the feed?" District Attorney Vance's square reappeared. "I'm still here." Judge Harmon's connection dropped. "Technical difficulties," Chu said. "It happens. They'll get him back online in a minute." But Sarah wasn't looking at her screen anymore. She was looking at Max. The dog had risen to his feet, his entire body vibrating with tension, a continuous low growl rumbling from his chest. His eyes were still fixed on the laptop, on the black square where Judge Harmon's face had been. "Max," Sarah said quietly, "what is it?" "Boy, what did you see?" The dog didn't respond to her voice. He took a step toward the laptop, then another, his nose working, as if trying to catch a scent through the screen itself. It was behavior Sarah had never seen before, and it made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The connection didn't come back. After 15 minutes, the hearing was officially postponed. Sarah gathered her things mechanically, her mind racing. She tried to call Judge Harmon's office directly, but got only voicemail. She called the courthouse, but no one could tell her anything useful. Technical problems. The judge was probably dealing with his IT department. Everything would be rescheduled. She was walking to her car, Max at her heel, when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Detective James Monroe, Homicide Division. "Sarah, call me. Now it's about Webb." She dialed before she'd even reached the parking lot. "Monroe, what's going on?" "Webb's dead." Monroe's voice was flat, the tone of a man who had seen too much to be surprised anymore. "Guards found him 20 minutes ago. Someone got to him in his cell." Sarah stopped walking. Max stopped beside her, looking up at her face, reading her tension. "That's impossible. He was just on screen. He was in the middle of a hearing." "The hearing was fake," Monroe said. Or at least, something about it was. "I don't have all the details yet, but Sarah, there's something else. Something you need to see. Can you get to the courthouse, Judge Harmon's chambers, and bring Max?" The drive across Atlanta took forever in the late morning traffic. Sarah's hands were tight on the wheel, her thoughts churning. Webb was dead. The hearing had been fake, and Judge Harmon had disappeared. These 3 facts circled in her mind like sharks, each one connected to the others by threads she couldn't yet see. The courthouse was surrounded by police vehicles when she arrived. Yellow tape cordoned off the main entrance. Sarah badged her way through, Max walking at her side, his alert posture drawing glances from every officer they passed. They knew Max's reputation. If the dog was on edge, there was a reason. Monroe met her in the lobby. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, his face carrying the permanent weariness of 20 years in homicide. He nodded at Sarah, glanced at Max, and led them toward the elevators without preamble. "Judge Harmon's wife called 911 about an hour ago," Monroe said as they rode up. "She'd been trying to reach him since last night. When she couldn't get through this morning, she came down here herself. His office door was locked from the inside. When we breached it, we found signs of a struggle. Blood on the carpet. No body." "No body," Sarah repeated. "But you said Webb was killed in his cell." "Different crime scenes. Same case, I think. That's why I called you." Monroe paused, choosing his words carefully. "When we processed Harmon's office, we found something. A setup. Professional equipment, cameras, lights, a green screen. Someone had created a studio in there." Sarah's stomach dropped. "A deepfake studio. That's my guess. Someone grabbed Harmon, set up their equipment, and used AI to fake his appearance for the hearing. We're pulling the courthouse security footage now, but so far we've got nothing useful. Whoever did this knew exactly where the cameras were and how to avoid them." They reached Harmon's floor. Monroe led them down a corridor lined with portraits of past judges, their painted eyes seeming to follow the trio as they walked. At the end of the hall, uniformed officers stood guard outside a door marked with Harmon's nameplate. Monroe nodded to them, and they stepped aside. The office had been transformed. Sarah stopped in the doorway, taking it all in. The elegant furniture had been pushed to the walls. In the center of the room, where Harmon's desk should have been, stood a metal frame supporting a curved green screen. Professional lighting rigs pointed at a single chair positioned before it. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting cameras and computers that hummed quietly in the corner. "They moved all his stuff," Monroe said. "Set this up overnight, best we can figure. Building security shows Harmon entering his office yesterday evening, around 6. He never left, but somehow none of the cameras caught anyone else coming or going." Sarah walked slowly into the room, Max ranging ahead of her, his nose to the floor. The dog moved in careful circles, sampling the air, processing information that humans could only guess at. She watched him pause at the chair before the green screen, his body tensing. "Max, what do you have?" The dog whined, a sound of frustration. He circled the chair again, then sat, his gaze fixed on something invisible. "He's picking up a scent," Sarah said. "Someone was here, someone he doesn't know. Can he track them? If the trail's fresh enough." She looked at Monroe. "Where does this lead? The kidnapping, the fake hearing, Webb's murder. What's the connection?" Monroe handed her a tablet. Webb was about to testify, not just against his own case. He'd cut a deal with the feds. He was going to give up names, dates, everything, the full network. His organization wasn't just moving money. They were providing financial infrastructure for a consortium of criminal enterprises across the Southeast, drug cartels, arms dealers, and something else. He swiped to a new document. Sarah's eyes widened as she read. "Prometheus Tech," she said. "The AI startup. Webb's money helped fund them. They specialize in synthetic media, deepfakes, voice cloning, digital identity creation. Legitimate applications, supposedly, but according to Webb's preliminary statements, they've been doing side work, creating fake identities for people who need to disappear, providing technology to criminals who want to manipulate digital evidence. And now, apparently, kidnapping judges and impersonating them in court proceedings." Sarah looked back at the green screen setup. They didn't just want to kill Webb. They wanted to control the hearing. They could have dismissed the case, ruled evidence inadmissible, done anything they wanted with a fake judge on the bench. And they almost did. If your dog hadn't reacted when he did, if the connection hadn't dropped, Who knows what might have happened? Max had moved to the window, his paws up on the sill, looking out at the city below. Sarah walked over to stand beside him. The Atlanta skyline stretched before them, glass and steel glittering in the harsh summer light. Somewhere out there, Judge Theodore Harmon was being held. Somewhere out there, the people behind Prometheus Tech were already planning their next move. "I need access to Webb's file," Sarah said. "Everything he told the feds. Every name, every contact, every location he mentioned. That's FBI territory. They're not going to share willingly. Then I need you to make them share." She turned to face Monroe. Max reacted to something during that hearing. He saw something the rest of us missed. Whatever he sensed, it came from that screen, from that fake image of Judge Harmon. If we can figure out what triggered him, we might be able to track these people. Monroe nodded slowly. "I'll make some calls. But Sarah, you need to be careful. If these people can grab a federal judge from his own office without leaving a trace, they're not amateurs. You start digging, they're going to notice. Let them notice." Sarah's jaw tightened. A man is dead. A judge is missing. And someone just made a mockery of our entire justice system. I'm not backing down. She walked back to where Max was still sitting by the window. The dog looked up at her, his dark eyes intelligent, questioning. She knelt beside him, her hand finding the familiar spot behind his ears. "We've got work to do, boy. You ready?" Max's tail wagged once, a brief acknowledgement. Then he was on his feet, moving toward the door, pulling her toward the hunt. The offices of Prometheus Tech occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Midtown, the kind of building designed to project success and innovation. Sarah parked across the street, watching the entrance through her windshield. It was early afternoon, and the sidewalks were busy with the lunch crowd. Young professionals in designer clothes carrying overpriced salads and talking into wireless earbuds about disruption and optimization. Max sat in the passenger seat, his attention fixed on the building's front doors. He hadn't relaxed since they'd left the courthouse. Whatever he'd sensed during that hearing, whatever had triggered his response, it was still present in his mind, a persistent signal that kept his instincts on high alert. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from Monroe, a file attachment labeled "Web Interview Transcript Partial." She opened it and began to read. The transcript was heavily redacted, black bars covering names and specific details that the FBI considered too sensitive for local law enforcement. But enough remained to paint a disturbing picture. Webb had described a system, a network of interlocking services that allowed criminals to operate with near impunity in the digital age. Need to disappear. Prometheus could create a new identity complete with social media history, employment records, and even AI-generated photographs of a person who never existed. Need to frame someone. They could produce convincing video evidence of crimes that never happened. Need to manipulate a legal proceeding. They could replace judges, witnesses, even defendants with synthetic versions indistinguishable from the real thing. The technology wasn't theoretical. According to Webb, it had already been deployed dozens of times. Cases had been thrown out based on fabricated evidence of police misconduct. Witnesses had recanted testimony after being shown deep-faked videos of themselves saying things they never said. And now, apparently, they had graduated to something more ambitious, taking control of entire courtroom proceedings. One name appeared multiple times in the unredacted portions: Alexander Reeves. Webb had described him as the architect, the visionary, the man who had transformed Prometheus Tech from a legitimate AI startup into something far more dangerous. Reeves had connections that reached deep into the criminal underworld, but he maintained a veneer of respectability that protected him from scrutiny. He sat on charity boards, he donated to political campaigns, He spoke at tech conferences about the future of synthetic media and the importance of ethical AI development. He was also, according to Webb, responsible for at least 3 disappearances that the police had never connected to him. Sarah put down her phone and studied the building again. Somewhere in there, Alexander Reeves was going about his day, secure in the knowledge that his operation was untouchable. He didn't know that Webb had talked before dying. He didn't know that a K-9 officer in a Zone 5 precinct had noticed something wrong with his carefully crafted deepfake. Or maybe he did know. Maybe he knew everything. Sarah's hand moved to her service weapon, a reflexive gesture. Then she looked at Max, at his alert posture, at the intelligence in his eyes, and she made a decision. "Come on, boy. Let's go introduce ourselves." The lobby of the Prometheus building was all white marble and chrome, designed to impress and intimidate. A security guard at the front desk looked up as Sarah and Max entered, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of the K-9's tactical harness and the badge clipped to Sarah's belt. "Can I help you, officer?" "Lieutenant, Atlanta PD. I'm here to speak with Alexander Reeves." "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't need an appointment. This is official police business." The guard's hand moved toward his phone, but he hesitated, clearly calculating. A uniformed officer with a police dog wasn't something you turned away easily, not without creating the kind of scene that could end up on social media. "I'll call up to Mr. Reeves' office. Please wait here." Sarah didn't wait. She walked toward the elevators, Max at her side. The guard called after her, his voice rising in alarm, but she ignored him. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside. The guard was still shouting as the doors closed. Sarah pressed the button for the top floor and felt the car begin to rise. "Probably should have played that differently," she muttered to Max, "but I wanted to see how they'd react." The dog looked up at her, his expression as close to skepticism as a canine could manage. The elevator opened onto a reception area that made the lobby look modest by comparison. Glass walls offered panoramic views of the city. Abstract art hung on every surface. A young woman in a designer suit sat behind a curved desk, her smile faltering as she took in Sarah's uniform and Max's alert stance. "I'm here for Alexander Reeves," Sarah said. "Tell him Lieutenant Collins wants to discuss Judge Theodore Harmon." The receptionist's smile vanished entirely. Her hand moved under the desk, pressing something that Sarah couldn't see. "Mr. Reeves is in a meeting. If you'd like to leave your contact information, I'll wait." Sarah walked past the desk toward a set of glass doors. Through them she could see a conference room, a long table surrounded by executives in expensive suits. At the head of the table sat a man who matched the photographs she'd seen of Alexander Reeves. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that spoke of personal trainers and tailored clothing. His hair was dark, graying artfully at the temples. His face was handsome in a generic way, the features regular and forgettable. He looked up as Sarah approached. Their eyes met through the glass. Reeves said something to the people around him. The meeting ended abruptly, suits scattering in various directions. By the time Sarah pushed through the doors, only Reeves remained, standing at the head of the table with his hands in his pockets and a smile on his face. "Lieutenant Collins," he said, "I've been expecting you, though I thought you'd be more subtle about it. You know my name. I know everything about you. It's what I do." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Water? Something for your remarkable companion?" Max had positioned himself between Sarah and Reeves, his body angled to intercept any threat. His growl was barely audible, but Sarah could feel it vibrating through the floor. "My dog doesn't like you," she said. "Dogs are excellent judges of character, or so they say." Reeves sat down, crossing his legs casually. "You're here about the unfortunate business with Judge Harmon, I assume. Terrible thing. I saw the news reports. There haven't been any news reports. Not yet. There will be. His smile widened. Lieutenant, I appreciate your directness, so let me return the favor. I know why you're here. I know what you suspect. And I know that you have absolutely no evidence to support any of it. A man was murdered in federal custody this morning. A judge was kidnapped from his own office. Both events are connected to technology that your company pioneered. Prometheus Tech develops synthetic media solutions for the entertainment industry and the defense sector. We have contracts with Hollywood studios and the Department of Defense. We are not in the business of criminal conspiracy. Marcus Webb said otherwise. Something flickered behind Reeves's eyes. Just for a moment his composure cracked. Then it was gone, the smile back in place. Marcus Webb was a money launderer facing decades in federal prison. He would have said anything to reduce his sentence. The fact that he was killed before he could testify publicly should tell you something about the reliability of his claims. It tells me that someone wanted him silenced. Indeed it does, but that someone isn't me, Lieutenant. I'm a businessman. I create technology. I don't use it to commit crimes. Sarah leaned forward. Then you won't mind if I bring in our forensic technicians to examine your servers, to verify that your systems weren't used to create the deepfake that appeared in that courtroom this morning. I would mind very much. Our servers contain proprietary technology worth billions of dollars. Trade secrets that our competitors would kill to access. He paused. Metaphorically speaking, of course. I can get a warrant. You can try, but our legal team has successfully blocked every subpoena and warrant attempt for the past 3 years. We take our intellectual property very seriously. Reeves stood, buttoning his jacket. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have another meeting. My assistant will show you out. We're not done here. Yes, Lieutenant, we are. Unless you have something more than accusations and suspicions, there's nothing more to discuss. And next time you want to visit, I suggest calling ahead. Our security protocols are quite strict. He walked toward the door. Max moved to block his path, and for a moment the tableau held. Reeves looked down at the dog, his smile never wavering. Beautiful animal, he said. Belgian Malinois, correct? Remarkable sense of smell, remarkable instincts. It's fascinating, really, what dogs can perceive that humans cannot. They see the world in ways we can barely imagine. He stepped around Max and walked out of the room. Sarah watched him go, her jaw tight, her hands clenched at her sides. We'll finish this conversation, she called after him. Count on it. Reeves didn't respond. The glass doors closed behind him, and Sarah was left alone with Max and the overwhelming sense that she'd just shown her hand to an enemy who was already 3 moves ahead. The drive back to the precinct gave Sarah time to think. Reeves had known she was coming. He'd known her name, known about the hearing, known about Webb's murder before any of it had hit the press. Either he had sources inside the police department, or his surveillance capabilities were even more extensive than she'd imagined. She needed help. Someone with technical expertise who could match what Prometheus Tech was capable of. Someone who understood the digital landscape in ways that traditional law enforcement did not. She made a call. Technical Crimes Unit, Detective Park speaking. Grace, it's Sarah Collins. I need a favor. Grace Park was the best forensic technician in the department, a former software engineer who'd traded Silicon Valley's salary for the satisfaction of putting cybercriminals behind bars. She and Sarah had worked together on 6 cases over the years, developing a professional respect that bordered on friendship. Collins, I heard about the courthouse thing. Wild stuff. What do you need? Everything you can find on Prometheus Tech. Corporate structure, financial records, employee lists, anything that's in the public record, and some things that might not be. That's a big ask. Prometheus is connected. Political donations, government contracts, the works. If I start poking around, people are going to notice. People have already noticed. A judge is missing, Grace. A witness is dead. And I just walked out of a meeting with Alexander Reeves, who basically admitted he knows everything about me and everything about this case. There was a pause. You confronted him directly? It wasn't my most subtle moment. No kidding. Another pause, longer this time. All right, I'll see what I can dig up. But Sarah, be careful. These synthetic media companies, they're not like normal tech firms. They have capabilities that most people don't understand. If Reeves is really using his technology for criminal purposes, he could be manipulating digital evidence in ways we can't even detect. That's what I'm counting on you to help me figure out. Give me a few hours. I'll call you back. Sarah ended the call as she pulled into the precinct parking lot. Max jumped out of the car and stretched, his tongue lolling. For a moment he looked like any other dog, happy to be outside, enjoying the warmth of the afternoon sun. Then his head snapped up, his ears pricked forward, and the moment of relaxation was gone. He was looking toward the precinct entrance, where two men in dark suits stood waiting. Federal agents. Sarah recognized the posture, the attitude, the barely concealed sense of authority. She walked toward them, Max at her side. Lieutenant Collins, the taller of the two, flashed a badge. FBI, Special Agent Marcus Torres. This is Special Agent Diana Webb, no relation. Sarah noted the clarification, the acknowledgement that they knew about the dead man's identity. What can I do for you, agents? We need to talk about your visit to Prometheus Tech this afternoon, and about certain activities that may be interfering with an ongoing federal investigation. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's discuss it inside, preferably somewhere private. The interview room was small, windowless, designed to make suspects uncomfortable. Sarah had conducted hundreds of interrogations in rooms just like it. Now she sat on the other side of the table, with Max lying at her feet and two FBI agents studying her like she was a problem to be solved. Lieutenant Collins, Torres began, we appreciate your dedication to the Harmon case, but we need you to understand the larger picture here. By all means, enlighten me. Prometheus Tech has been on our radar for over 2 years. We have an ongoing investigation into their activities, including their potential connections to organized crime, their possible involvement in evidence tampering, and their suspected role in multiple disappearances. What we do not need is a local police officer walking into their headquarters and putting them on high alert. Sarah's eyes narrowed. If you've been investigating them for 2 years, why is Theodore Harmon still missing? Why was Marcus Webb killed in federal custody? Your investigation doesn't seem to be making much progress. Agent Webb leaned forward. These things take time, Lieutenant. Building a case against someone like Reeves requires patience and precision. We can't afford to spook him before we have everything in place. A man is dead. A judge is being held somewhere against his will. How much more time are you planning to take? That's not your concern. It is absolutely my concern. This is my city. These are my cases. And your agency's failure to act has put lives at risk. Torres held up a hand, a placating gesture. We're not here to argue jurisdiction. We're here to coordinate, to make sure we're all working toward the same goal. Which is taking down Reeves and his entire operation, permanently. But to do that, we need everyone on the same page. We need you to share what you know, and we need you to let us handle the investigation from here. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She looked down at Max, who was watching the agents with undisguised suspicion. Then she looked back at Torres. When Max reacted during the hearing this morning, it wasn't random. He detected something about that deepfake image that triggered his instincts. I don't know what it was yet, but I'm going to find out. That's exactly the kind of investigation we can conduct together, Torres said. With the Bureau's resources, we can analyze the video feed, identify the signatures of the synthetic media, trace the technology back to its source. And in the meantime, Judge Harmon sits in captivity, possibly injured, possibly dead. We have every reason to believe he's still alive. Reeves needs him. The fake hearing was just the beginning. We believe they have plans for additional proceedings, additional manipulations. Harmon is too valuable to dispose of. Unless they realize you're onto them, unless they decide he's become a liability. Agent Webb's expression didn't change. We're aware of the risks, Lieutenant. But rushing in without a plan would be worse. We need to do this right. Sarah stood. Max rose beside her, his posture mirroring her tension. I'll share what I know, she said. But I'm not stopping my investigation. If I find something that leads me to Harmon, I'm going after it, with or without your blessing. Torres nodded as if he'd expected nothing less. We'll be in touch, Lieutenant. In the meantime, watch your back. Reeves knows you're coming for him now, and he has resources you can't even imagine. Sarah didn't respond. She walked out of the interview room, Max at her heels, and didn't look back. The sun was setting over Atlanta by the time Grace Park called back. Sarah had spent the intervening hours at her desk, reviewing everything she could find on Prometheus Tech, Alexander Reeves, and the tangled web of corporations and shell companies that connected them. The picture that emerged was troubling. A seemingly legitimate tech company with tendrils reaching into darker waters. I found something, Grace said without preamble. You're not going to like it. Tell me. Prometheus Tech has a subsidiary, a company called Deepframe Solutions, registered in Delaware, but operating out of a warehouse in the industrial district south of downtown. On paper, they do post-production work for film studios, visual effects, that kind of thing. But their power consumption is off the charts, way more than you'd need for standard video editing. And their employee roster includes 3 former military contractors with backgrounds in psychological operations. Sarah wrote down the address. What else? Deepframe purchased a large quantity of specialized medical equipment 6 months ago, the kind of stuff you'd need for a mobile surgical unit or a field hospital. No public explanation for why a visual effects company would need surgical equipment. They're holding people there. That's where Harmon is. Maybe, but Sarah, be careful. If I could find this, Reeves knows it's findable. It could be a trap. Or it could be the break we need. Sarah looked at Max, who had lifted his head at the tension in her voice. Can you send me everything you have? Building plans, employee records, anything that might help? Already in your inbox. And Sarah, don't go in alone. Whatever's in that warehouse, it's not something you should face without backup. Sarah ended the call and opened the files Grace had sent. The warehouse was large, over 50,000 square feet, surrounded by chain-link fencing and monitored by security cameras. The building plans showed a standard industrial layout, but the power grid modifications suggested something much more sophisticated beneath the surface. She should call Torres. She should request tactical support, coordinate with the FBI, do everything by the book. But every hour that passed was another hour that Judge Harmon spent in captivity. Another hour for Reeves to solidify his position, to eliminate evidence, to disappear if necessary. Sarah made her decision. She reached for her tactical vest and began to gear up. Max watched her, his body tensing with anticipation. He knew what the vest meant. He knew what came next. It's you and me, boy, she said, just like always. The industrial district was quiet at night. The warehouses dark and silent, the streets empty of traffic. Sarah parked 3 blocks from the Deepframe facility and approached on foot, Max moving silently beside her. The night vision setting on her scope revealed the perimeter. A chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, security cameras at regular intervals, a single guard booth at the main entrance. She circled the compound, looking for weaknesses. On the east side, where the fence met a concrete drainage channel, she found what she needed. A section of chain link had been cut and hastily repaired, the wire twisted back together but not properly secured. Recent entry point. Someone had used this before. Sarah pulled back the fence and slipped through, Max following without hesitation. They moved across the parking lot in the shadows, staying clear of the camera sightlines that Grace had mapped out. The warehouse loomed ahead of them, its windows dark, its walls revealing nothing. There was a service entrance on the north side, a metal door with an electronic keypad lock. Sarah pulled out a device Grace had given her months ago for a different case, a field-expedient lock bypass that shouldn't have existed in official police inventories. She pressed it against the keypad, waited for the soft click and eased the door open. The interior was exactly what the building plans had shown. A cavernous space filled with industrial equipment, shelving units, the detritus of legitimate business operations. But Max wasn't interested in any of it. His nose was working, processing scents that Sarah couldn't detect. He moved forward with purpose, leading her deeper into the building. They found the hidden door behind a false wall of shipping containers. It was seamless, invisible to the casual observer, but Max's nose didn't lie. He sat before the containers and looked at Sarah, his message clear. She searched the wall until she found the release mechanism, a pressure point disguised as a rivet. The containers swung outward, revealing a corridor that plunged down into the earth. The stairs led to a basement that wasn't on any building plan. Industrial lighting flickered overhead, illuminating a space that looked like something from a science fiction film. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens displaying footage that Sarah recognized immediately. Courtrooms, police stations, government offices, real-time video feeds from across the city, from across the state, from across the country. Prometheus Tech wasn't just creating deepfakes. They were monitoring everything, every public space, every official proceeding, every moment of civic life that could be captured by a camera. They had built an apparatus of total surveillance, and no one had known it existed. Max growled. Sarah followed his gaze to a door at the far end of the room, heavier than the others, reinforced with steel. She approached it carefully, her weapon drawn, her senses hyper-alert. The door wasn't locked. It swung open at her touch, revealing a smaller room beyond. Medical equipment lined the walls. In the center, strapped to a hospital bed, lay Judge Theodore Harmon. He was alive. His eyes fluttered open as Sarah entered, his face slack with drugs, his recognition slow to dawn. Who are you? Lieutenant Collins, Atlanta PD. I'm here to get you out. She moved to the bed, checking his restraints. They were professional grade, the kind used in psychiatric facilities. Whoever had put him here knew what they were doing. They took my face, Harmon whispered. They made me watch. They put me on the screen and I watched myself say things I never said, do things I never did. I know. It's over now. Can you walk? I don't know. The drugs. Sarah was reaching for the first restraint when Max barked. A sharp, urgent sound she'd never heard him make before. She spun around just as the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting the room in red. Figures appeared in the doorway, tactical gear, weapons raised, moving with the precision of trained professionals. Sarah counted 3, then 4, then 5. Too many. Way too many. Lieutenant Collins. Alexander Reeves' voice came from behind the armed men, calm and amused. I wondered if you'd find this place. I'm impressed. Most police officers would have waited for backup. Let him go, Reeves. The FBI knows about this facility. They're on their way. No, they're not. Your phone has been jammed since you entered the building, and your FBI friends are currently chasing a false lead on the other side of the city, a deep fake of Judge Harmon, spotted at a hotel near the airport. Very convincing work, if I do say so myself. Sarah's mind raced. She was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and alone except for Max. The dog had positioned himself between her and the armed men, his teeth bared, his growl continuous. "Call off your dog, Lieutenant, or my men will be forced to neutralize him. You touch him and I'll kill you myself." So fierce. I admire that truly. But let's be realistic. You're in no position to make threats. Reeves stepped into the room, his smile visible even in the dim light. "I didn't expect you to be a problem, you know. A K-9 officer working routine cases, but then you noticed something during that hearing, something that no one was supposed to notice. Max saw through your fake. He knew it wasn't really Harmon." "Yes. Remarkable, really. We've fooled facial recognition systems, voice analysis software, even trained investigators. But we couldn't fool a dog." Reeves shook his head. "There's something about K-9 perception that we don't fully understand. Some frequency, some pattern, some essence that our technology can't quite replicate. Your partner exposed a flaw in our system, a flaw I intend to study very carefully. You're not touching him. I'm afraid you don't have a choice." Reeves nodded to his men. "Take the dog, kill the lieutenant, and prepare Judge Harmon for relocation. We still have use for his face." The armed men moved forward. Max launched himself at the nearest one, 90 pounds of muscle and fury, striking the man's chest and driving him to the ground. Sarah drew her weapon and fired, dropping a second man before the others could react. Then she was moving, using the medical equipment as cover, trying to reach a better position. The firefight was chaos. Muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness. Sarah felt a bullet graze her arm, another strike her vest with enough force to stagger her. She fired back, conserving ammunition, making every shot count. Max was a blur of motion, attacking and retreating, his training keeping him alive in the lethal crossfire. But there were too many of them. One of Reeves's men got behind her, his weapon aimed at her head. She turned, knowing she was too slow, knowing this was the end. The shot never came. Instead, there was a deafening crash as the reinforced door at the top of the stairs exploded inward. Bodies poured through the gap. Tactical gear marked with yellow letters that Sarah had never been happier to see. FBI. Agent Torres was in the lead, his weapon raised, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Federal agents, drop your weapons, now!" The firefight ended as quickly as it had begun. Reeves's men surrendered one by one, their tactical advantage evaporated. Reeves himself stood frozen in the center of the room, his composure finally shattered, his eyes wild with disbelief. "This is impossible," he said. "My systems would have warned me. The jamming—" "We had our own technical specialist," Torres said, nodding at someone behind him. Sarah looked and saw Grace Park, a laptop in her hands, a fierce smile on her face. "She's been tracking your frequencies for hours. When you jammed Lieutenant Collins's phone, you lit up like a Christmas tree." Reeves's face twisted with rage. He reached for something at his belt, a small device that looked like a phone, but clearly wasn't. Before he could activate it, Max was there. The dog hit Reeves in a flying tackle, driving him to the ground, his jaws closing on the man's arm with enough pressure to make him scream. "Max, out!" Sarah's command was calm, controlled. The dog released immediately, stepping back but keeping his eyes fixed on Reeves. "Good boy." Torres approached Reeves, handcuffs ready. "Alexander Reeves, you're under arrest for kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and about 24 other charges we'll figure out later. You have the right to remain silent." Sarah tuned out the Miranda warning. She walked to Judge Harmon's bed, where EMTs were already working to stabilize him. The judge's eyes were clearer now, the drugs wearing off, recognition dawning. "You came for me," he said. "I didn't think anyone would come." "Justice doesn't stop because someone tries to fake it," Sarah said. "This is still Atlanta. We still have rules, and people like Reeves don't get to rewrite them. Harmon's hand found hers, his grip weak but grateful. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you." Sarah nodded and stepped back. Max pressed against her leg, his body warm and solid, his presence a comfort that words couldn't express. She reached down and scratched behind his ears. "You did good, boy. You did real good." The next few hours were a blur of activity. EMTs transported Judge Harmon to the hospital, where doctors confirmed that he would make a full recovery. FBI technicians swarmed through the underground facility, cataloging evidence, seizing computers, documenting the full scope of Reeves's operation. The surveillance system alone would take months to fully analyze. But initial findings suggested that Prometheus Tech had been monitoring thousands of public officials, building a database of footage that could be used to create deepfakes of anyone in a position of authority. Sarah gave her statement to Agent Torres, then gave it again to his supervisor, then gave it a third time to a Justice Department lawyer who flew in from Washington specifically to oversee the case. Through it all, Max stayed by her side, patient and watchful, his presence a constant reminder of why they were here. It was nearly dawn by the time she finally walked out of the precinct. The eastern sky was turning pink, the first light of day washing over a city that didn't know how close it had come to a fundamental corruption of its legal system. People would go to work today, appear in courtrooms, trust that the judges on the bench were who they claimed to be. They would never know about deep-frame solutions, about the underground facility, about the technology that could have turned their entire justice system into a puppet show. That was probably for the best. Some knowledge was too heavy for ordinary citizens to carry. Sarah drove home slowly, Max asleep in the passenger seat, his paws twitching with dreams she couldn't imagine. She thought about Alexander Reeves, about the empire he had built, about the casual arrogance with which he had assumed he could manipulate reality itself. He was in federal custody now, facing charges that would keep him in prison for the rest of his life. But his technology was still out there. Others would pick up where he left off. The war against synthetic deception was just beginning. Her phone buzzed. A text from Grace. "News is breaking. You're famous." Sarah ignored it. She wasn't interested in fame. She was interested in sleep, in food, in a few hours of peace before the next crisis demanded her attention. She pulled into her driveway as the sun cleared the horizon. Max woke as the car stopped, stretching, yawning, looking at her with the calm certainty that everything was exactly as it should be. She opened his door and watched him jump out, his tail wagging, his energy already restored. Home, safety, rest. She followed Max to the front door, her keys in her hand, and for just a moment, standing in the golden light of morning, she allowed herself to feel something like hope. The debriefings continued for days. Sarah sat through endless meetings with FBI brass, DOJ officials, and internal affairs investigators who wanted to understand exactly how a K-9 officer had managed to crack a case that their own agencies had been fumbling for years. She answered every question honestly, gave credit where it was due, and deflected the praise that kept coming her way. Max was the hero. Max had seen through the deepfake when everyone else had been fooled. Max's instincts had started the chain of events that brought down Alexander Reeves and his entire operation. All Sarah had done was trust her partner. Judge Harmon recovered steadily. He gave interviews from his hospital bed, describing his captivity, the horror of watching his digital double make decisions he never would have made. His testimony would be crucial to the prosecution's case against Reeves, but more importantly, it served as a warning. The technology existed, it was being used, and unless society found ways to detect and counter it, the foundations of truth itself were at risk. The media coverage was intense. Sarah Collins and K-9 Max became household names, symbols of old-fashioned police work, triumphing over cutting-edge criminal technology. Interview requests poured in. Book offers followed. A cable network expressed interest in a documentary. Sarah turned them all down. She wasn't interested in celebrity. She was interested in doing her job. 3 weeks after the warehouse raid, Sarah received a call from the Atlanta police chief's office. She was being considered for a promotion, commander of a newly created unit focused on synthetic media crimes, tasked with developing protocols for detecting and countering deepfake technology in criminal investigations. The job would mean less fieldwork, more administration, more meetings, and more bureaucracy. She thought about it for 2 days. Then she politely declined. "I appreciate the offer," she told the chief, "but my place is on the street, with Max. That's where we do our best work." The chief seemed to understand. He shook her hand, thanked her for her service, and let her go back to the only life she knew. It was a Thursday afternoon, clear and warm, when Sarah and Max returned to their normal patrol. The Zone 5 precinct had quieted down, the media circus moving on to other stories, the daily rhythm of police work reasserting itself. Sarah drove through the familiar streets, Max riding shotgun, both of them settling back into routines that had been disrupted by 3 weeks of chaos. They were passing through the downtown area when Max suddenly went alert. His ears pricked forward, his nose working, his body tensing with that particular focus that Sarah knew so well. She slowed the car, scanning the sidewalks, looking for whatever had triggered his response. There, a man in a grey suit walking too quickly, glancing over his shoulder too often. He was heading toward the MARTA station, trying to blend into the afternoon crowd, not quite succeeding. Sarah pulled to the curb. "Max, track." The dog was out of the car before she'd finished speaking, his nose to the ground, following a scent trail that led directly to the man in grey. Sarah followed, her hand on her weapon, her senses sharp. The man saw them coming. His pace increased, became a jog, became a run. He was heading for the station entrance, trying to lose himself in the underground. Sarah gave chase. Max was faster, his 4 legs eating up the distance, his body low and streamlined. The man reached the station stairs, started to descend, and Max caught him. The dog didn't bite, didn't attack, just positioned himself in the man's path, blocking his escape with 90 pounds of immovable determination. Atlanta PD. Sarah's badge was out, her voice calm but commanding. "Don't move." The man's face crumpled. He was young, maybe 25, sweating despite the pleasant weather. "I didn't do anything, I swear." "Then you won't mind answering some questions." Sarah studied him, her instincts working. "What's in the bag?" The man clutched his messenger bag tighter. "Nothing, personal items," Max growled. It was a sound that suggested disagreement. "Let me rephrase. You can show me what's in the bag voluntarily, or I can call for backup, and we can do this at the station. Your choice." The man's shoulders slumped. He handed over the bag. Inside, Sarah found 3 phones, a tablet, and a small laptop. All high-end, all still factory-sealed, all with price tags from a store 2 blocks away. "Shoplifting," she said. "Really? You made us chase you through downtown for shoplifting?" "I needed the money," the man said, his voice barely audible. "I lost my job. My rent is due. I didn't know what else to do." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Max, who had relaxed now that the threat was neutralized, his tongue lolling in the afternoon heat. "Sit down," she said. "We're going to have a conversation." She returned the merchandise to the store. She explained the situation to the manager, who agreed not to press charges if the man, whose name was Tyler, agreed to community service. She gave Tyler her card and the number of a job placement program that worked with people in crisis. She watched him walk away, his step a little lighter, his future a little less dark. It wasn't the kind of case that made headlines. It wasn't the kind of work that would earn her another medal or another interview request, but it was the kind of police work that mattered, one person at a time, one problem at a time, one small piece of justice in a world that often seemed to have forgotten what the word meant. Sarah returned to her car, Max trotting beside her. She opened the passenger door and the dog jumped in, settling into his familiar position. "Good work today, partner." Max's tail wagged. His dark eyes met hers with the quiet understanding that had always existed between them. No words were necessary. They knew what they were, what they did, what they meant to each other. Lieutenant Sarah Collins, K-9 Max, Atlanta PD, still on the job, still making a difference, still doing the work that needed to be done. Sarah started the car and pulled back into traffic. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new challenges, new opportunities to serve and protect. But tonight, for a few quiet hours, she would rest. The radio crackled, dispatch calling with another report, another problem, another citizen in need. Sarah reached for the mic. Unit 5K9 responding. What's the situation? The work never ended. The city never slept. And as long as there were people who needed help, Sarah Collins and Max would be there to answer the call. She accelerated into the evening traffic, Max alert beside her, both of them ready for whatever came next. The skyline of Atlanta rose before them, a forest of lights against the darkening sky, millions of lives intersecting in ways that no one could predict. Somewhere out there, crimes were being planned, victims were being created, and the thin line between order and chaos was being tested. But tonight, that line would hold. Tonight, justice would prevail. And tomorrow, they would do it all again.